I'm here to tell you all that life as you know it has ended.
Whatever do you mean?
You know what separates the winners from the losers, kid?
The score.
What did you say?
What we're dealing with here is a complete lack of respect.
Think it over. Could be part of something.
Identify it.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Steel Sanctuary Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Ribeiro from SteelSanctuary.com. I've got Ron Lippock with us here in front of the pod, and we've got a very special guest, Breiden Fehoko, former and maybe future Steeler. Who knows at this point? He's been around enough. Breiden, welcome to the Steel Sanctuary Podcast.
Thank you guys for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be on and just give some of my insight.
Excellent. Take us through this offseason. You weren't on the roster at first. You got signed late. Lasted about 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Gave him some, much needed depth at the defensive line. What was that like for you?
This offseason has been a little tricky because this is kind of the first true year since I've been in the NFL, 6 years, that I haven't done a full offseason with a team. And honestly, it was kind of like one of the best off seasons. It was cool to be at home for the time being, not just recovering as far as from a physical standpoint, but getting to find out things about myself, that I didn't know I could do. I got into more avenues off the field, as far as business ventures and even getting around someone like the little league and high school teams around town, helping them out, coaching and just giving advice here and there. Also did a fast for my health, just to, cut some weight and challenge myself mentally. And so it's been cool, outside of spending time with family. This offseason, being away from the game a little bit made me appreciate things I took for granted off the field. It made me appreciate the game a little bit more. And then getting back with Pittsburgh for training camp was fun as always. Being around those guys, those guys embrace me every time I'm back. I enjoy being around them. I enjoy being around Coach Tomlin and that staff. And so, I understood the circumstances going in, as a veteran guy. You're kind of like an insurance policy, right? If, a draft pick doesn't work out, if the new guys they have there, if they're not, up to date on things they need. And so you're brought in as an insurance guy. And obviously they have, two mammoths of D-line picks that are well ahead of the curve. And so, getting cut was a good thing for them, not necessarily good for me, but, it goes to show that they can trust those guys. And, I understand the nature of this business, especially being an older guy, and what the circumstances you are going into situation. But this offseason was cool for me, man. It was cool being back with Pittsburgh for the short time being. And, now just looking forward to my next venture.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in on that too, Brandon, because you got your setup here. You're looking professional and you're looking media ready. How hard is it to juggle, the professional career that you still want to? I'm assuming you still want to continue, but in the same instance, you're moving to diversify, right? You got the media stuff going on a little bit. You're really got some great stuff going on X. You talked a little bit about coaching, perhaps. Is there another direction you want to go that you're already thinking about after football, and how do you sort of navigate football and moving on at that same time?
Well, when I think I whenever I get asked this question a lot, I go back to my exit meeting with Mike Tomlin at the end of the year, and Coach Tomlin actually suggested, not suggested, but he asked me, he's like, have you ever thought about coaching? And, I'm sitting there in this exit meeting, and we had talked about football for 15, 20 minutes, just what I've done in my career, whatever. And then at the end, he asked, have you ever thought about coaching? And I said, well, Coach, no, not exactly. And, he tells me, he's like, man, I think you'd make a hell of a coach one day. I think you could be sitting in this seat right here across from me, impacting young men, changing the game. And I won't go into too depth of what he said, because some of that stuff I'd like to keep private. But man, he expressed how I'd make a darn good coach one day, excuse my language. And, he talked about the qualities and the characteristics that I brought as a player would translate into coaching. And so that's one of the avenues that I didn't ever think I'd get into one day. And I mean, it's the possibilities there, somebody like a first ballot Hall of Fame coach, for him to stamp that and for him to recommend that, to me, means a lot. And then, I think some of my relationships with front office personnel, people throughout my career, whether it's been with the Chargers or the Steelers, have also expressed to me that I should get into that side of the business, whether it's scouting personnel, general manager work, things along that line. And so those are two different avenues outside of football that have been expressed to me that, from people that have done it and done it at a high level, have told me that, hey, you do a really good job at our job one day. And then obviously media has always been around since I've been in college, since I've been in high school. I majored at LSU in communications and journalism. And so it's always come natural to me. And that's kind of been the third venture that I've kind of tried to dig in more because it's more of the natural thing to do, especially with social media, and how it's been able to grow platforms now. And I think whether or not I do decide to get into media, coaching, personnel, front office work, it doesn't it doesn't hurt to, lay foundations here and there. So,
Absolutely.
on X, I'm starting to be a little more transparent about the game of football and, trying to give a little more insight. And I've had some really good guidance in my life from really good mentors and people I've been around. So, I have no doubt in whatever venture I decide to, do outside of football. And for now, I'm still always going to chase football because I'm 28. I'm in the prime years of my life physically. I can obviously still play football at a high level. Last game I went out there against Tampa Bay in preseason, man, I played phenomenal, and so that kind of told me like, hey, you still got some juice left in the tank. So, don't hang them up yet. But whatever happens next for me, I'm gonna be grateful and truly excited because whatever I put my mind to, whatever I've done in life, I've done it full speed and with a full heart and never looked back doing it.
Yeah, you brought up Mike Tomlin. I think it's interesting. I saw you on X say that you learned more in
Mm.
like the 2 or 3 years you've been here in Pittsburgh than the rest of your football career. What's it like playing for a guy like Mike Tomlin? I mean, you always hear players rave about what a man he is and what a great coach he is to play for. What is it like? What's the experience like playing for
Well,
Mike Tomlin?
I think the ongoing skill development as a football player really stood out to me, and I think everybody knows in the NFL X's and O's, right? Obviously, these head coaches, these position coaches, they wouldn't be in the position they're in, unless they weren't qualified to do so. Being around Coach T, man, I learned so much, not just about the game, but about life, how to coach men, how to lead men, how to get the most out of guys. One of my favorite quotes from him was, "We got to fit 8 pounds in a 5 pound bag." And that was some of the best mentality of Tomlinisms I went into work with every day is how can I get the most out of this day, whether it's physical work, whether it's mental work, film room, on the field, and how to approach it from a point of view really showed me how to be a professional the last 2.5, 3 years I was in Pittsburgh, how to go about my business, how the greats go about their business, how he sees the game from a coach's standpoint, how he relates it to a player standpoint, and how that helps the development of young players and even older players, guys like Cam, guys like TJ, who are still learning this game that's a child game. It's one of the amazing things about a guy like Coach Tomlin is he's able to get the most out of people. It doesn't matter what level or what skill or what experience you come from and the background you come from. He's always going to get the most out of guys. And I think that was one of the best things I appreciated about my time being there around him.
When you were there, I know you weren't there as for as much of a time as in prior year, but were you able, with all the new additions, right, to see how they're bringing that all together? Because especially on defense, there's a lot of new faces. How do you see them bring that all together, and what's going to change? Do you think about that defense with guys like Ramsey there, Slay's there? You got the 2 rookie defensive linemen that are going to contribute heavily. So from a defensive lineman standpoint, especially, what changes when you bring in guys like a Ramsey and a Slay for you as a defensive lineman, and how do you see that sort of changing the way this defense plays this year?
Yeah, I think with experienced back end guys, you're more able to do, and not just in speaking in terms of Pittsburgh, but anywhere.
Right.
You're more able to do so much more versatility work on the football field as if you're locked down to guys who are certain positions, whether as this guy's just a free safety or this guy's just a corner, a boundary corner, field corner. When you have, guys like Jalen and Slay Juan Thornhill, Deshaun Elliott, Joey Porter Jr. I mean, the list goes on. You can do so much things because those guys have seen a lot of football. You can play different coverages. You can give different disguises. Guys can hold it a lot longer. When you can hold disguises, when you can hold shells a lot longer pre-snap as a defensive back, I know for a fact the quarterback has to hold that ball a tenth of a second longer, and that tenth of a second is the split second between a hurry and a sack fumble for T.J. Watt, Nick Herbig, Alex Highsmith, those guys. And so I know from a front perspective what you guys just asked, they appreciate that when you have really good defensive secondary behind them that can do those things, hold the coverage, disguise it, play man-to-man on more downs than usual. Just give them an extra time to get home because at the end of the day, man, sacks equals pay. As you can see, Micah Parsons in the NFL, and so everybody's trying to secure, $200+ million as a pass rusher now, and you need the secondary rush and coverage to work together.
What's been your impression of Derek Harmon and Keanu Benton? That's I know a lot of Steeler fans are very excited about those two guys and their future with the Steelers. What was your impression of those guys, and how do they look?
Well, Nunu.
Well, I think, yeah.
Nunu got there. Keanu. Sorry, I call him Nunu, but Keanu got there the same year I got there to Pittsburgh. So we've kind of grown together in terms of the Pittsburgh culture and what to expect. Derek is a large human being, along with YA. The Steelers drafted two physically big guys this year in this year's draft. I mean, obviously, as you can tell with the way they drafted, what their focus was, and that was getting bigger and getting more physical up front. Derek gives you, this like long, athletic type of bigger body guy. YA gives you this type of longer, rugged, put him in between the guards type of specimen. I think with Keanu being there, you have three young guys to build around for the future. And I think the great thing about it is Keanu's played nose tackle primarily in Pittsburgh, but he's also played a little bit of 4-eye or defensive end in that 3-4 scheme. YA played 4-eye. YA's played a little nose this preseason. Derek played primarily at 4-eye. And so moving forward, I think Pittsburgh's looking into, all right, what's it going to look like when Cam Hayward retires, right? What's it going to look like post Cam Hayward? And we need, that young core to come alive. And I think you can build a future. And obviously these guys have to go show it and prove it in regular season games, in divisional games against the Baltimores, the Cleveland, the Cincinnati's. But you're looking at the future, right? It's you always look at in years past how they were able to build, around like the Castros, the Pounceys. You build around a young core and you let them grow together. And I think this is what Pittsburgh is doing just on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of ask you about that offensive line side of the ball too, because that's a young core that they're for the most part anyway that they're developing as well.
Mm-hmm.
In practices, just seeing those guys last year and this year, how bullish are you on this offensive line? Where does it need to get better, and what does it need to do to get better?
I think for me, the biggest thing is going to be how they establish the run this year. When you look at Pittsburgh's offensive line, everybody in the NFL builds their offensive line differently. I think Pittsburgh built their offensive line and tailored it towards athletic big men, guys that can run laterally, east and west, and allow natural holes, natural cutback lanes in the offense for the running backs to find it. Because that's Arthur Smith's mentality is wide zone, and then boom, one cut and one running back is 40 yards backside down the field for the touchdown. That's what he's lived in. That's what he's done since his Tennessee days, dating even to Atlanta recently. And the more and more they're going to be able to get that run game going, it's going to open up the pass game. And you hear it's so cliche because everybody talks about it, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, you got to get the run game going to open up the pass. But especially with a guy like Aaron at quarterback, you don't want to just sit him in the pocket and throw the ball 40 times a game and let defensive linemen tee off on the rush, right? You need teams to play honest. You need linebackers to hesitate to where if they don't know if it's run or pass, right? That little hesitant of a second, just like I said on defensive side of the ball with the rush and the coverage with those guys, offensively, they need that too, right? If a linebacker and if I know safeties are they're pressed up and they don't know if it's run or pass, man, a guy like Aaron Rodgers, what he can do with that extra second, what he can do with the ball, and for the receivers finding a little hole in the seam, I mean, the rest is history. And so everything works hand in hand together. I think that's the biggest thing for me is seeing them develop the run game this year. And then, ultimately you're going to see the chunk plays, you're going to see the play action, the daggers, the shot plays, the DK, everything will come, but in due time, right? It's a process. It's going to be week one. Don't expect fireworks, right? Expect the gritty performance. People are not just the Steelers, but people, all 31 other teams are still trying to find their identity, as this season goes on and what they're good at and what they need to throw away. So, that's what I feel like is the biggest thing, especially for the offensive line this year.
The way you described the offensive line, the way the Steelers are building it, we've heard a lot that Caleb Johnson is the perfect fit for that Arthur Smith type offense. Did you have any feel on what Caleb Johnson's going to be like for the Steelers?
I like Caleb. His locker was next to mine in camp. He was really hard on himself every day. Expected a lot of himself, and that's good. You always want a rookie who's always going to seek perfection, right? Because that's how you become better in this league. But I'm really buying stock in Kenneth Gainwell, man. Jalen's going to be running back one, obviously. Well applauded extension today, well deserved. Yep. But I love Kenneth Gainwell, man. When we played Philly last year, that move I won't go into too much. That move he put on, man, was special. I think he's a really good utility back, man. I love how he protects. I love how he's another extension in the pass game for Aaron, for that offense. And for a guy like Caleb, who's running back 3 right now, you want to see him evolve in the offense. But this year primarily, I'm interested to see him take that next step in special teams, because that's where he's going to earn his money, right? When Jalen made the roster, when these young guys like Kenneth Gainwell and Philly made the roster and made a name for himself, it was on special teams. And that's how you got to earn your way as a running back in this league. If you're not a top 5 pick, if you're not Ashton Genty or the Saquon Barkleys of the world who get picked early, it's sad to say, but you got to make your way. You got to make your way on punt. You got to make your way on punt block, kickoff, running down. And that's how Caleb Johnson's going to get better in this league. People might ask, well, that has nothing to do with him running the ball or getting on offense. Well, it has everything to do, right? If the coaches can trust you in another phase of the game, that's how you're going to get trust, and that's how you're going to get more plays called for you. That's how you're going to get experience. If you never get on the field, you never get better as a player. And I think for him, special teams is going to be huge this year.
Yeah, if I'm correct in this, you got your first start in the NFL against the Steelers, correct?
Yes. 2021.
Like, did he did any part of that experience stand out to you, and how just amazing was it to get a start, number one? Mm-hmm. And what do you remember about that game?
Well, I think what I remember the most about that game was all week, Coach Staley, who was the head coach at the time, he emphasized we have to stop the Steelers' run game. The Steelers are going to try to come in here on Sunday Night Football and run the rock. I don't remember how much they were averaging, but, I played against Najee in college, and they were, the Steelers were running the rock really efficiently that year. And so I just remember, man, it was leading up to that week, man, where we were in a lot of base packages and, being a nose tackle, right? You're either in base, and if they call nickel, you're jogging your butt off the field, right? Because they want the athletic guys in there. And so I just remember that whole week leading up, we had a ton of base calls in, and first play of the game, I remember they come out under center and it's a single back. And I remember I was a shade to the left, and Kendrick Green was the center. And first thing I remember was, man, I remember it was a zone play, and they were running zone open, and they had a little motion. They had a little jet sweep. And I remember watching on film all week that whenever Canada, and I was with Canada at LSU, so I kind of had this tidbit. I was like, whenever Canada runs a jet sweep motion, if it's a run action, the play is going opposite of the run. And so he motions a receiver across the formation, and he went from the left to the right. And I knew for a second, I was like, the run's coming to my side. So, I mean, what I did was I cross-faced Kendrick Green. The guard came down with him. I shedded him, and it was the first play of the game, and I made a tackle for no gain. And, that was the first play I got in.
That's awesome.
Of the game, and just how quick the game happens, and just how things unfold, man. That's the little things of the game I appreciate now looking back to it as an older guy is, yeah, you go through things in practice, but in the game, man, like your mind's racing 100 times faster than the meeting room, and everything has to dial down to a split second and understanding all of that. And it was such a great experience. And then especially winning. I mean, it felt like it was such a stagnant game. And then I feel like the last 2 minutes, like it just blew up. Like, so, for those people who are bettors, man, I felt sorry. Cause I mean, there was like 3 touchdowns within a span of like 2 minutes or 4, whatever it was. It was like Big Ben threw a touchdown. Then we came back. There was a bus coverage from Pittsburgh. Mike Williams scores. And it's like, wow, like we just won the game. So one of the funnest experiences of my life, obviously my first start in the NFL. And it was definitely one to remember.
You brought up LSU, and I just want to back it up a little bit. You were on one hell of a squad that year in LSU. You had the Burrow, you had Jefferson, Jamar Chase. What was that like? What was that experience? Ed Orgeron, the coach?
Man, one of the greatest experience, man, is being able to win the national championship.
Right.
Knowing you were the best at something, whatever point it was in your life, is one of the best feelings in this world, right? You're on top of the mountain, right? That's something we all strive for as human beings, is to be the best at whatever we may be. It's whether it's sports or whether it's life. And to be a part of that team, it was so special, because I don't think a lot of people realize, man, we had a really tight bond. I mean, I could still call those guys to this day. I mean, me and Patrick Queen, we joke around almost every day whenever we're in Pittsburgh the last 2 years, whenever we see each other. But it's a brotherhood. Those guys are competitors, and are going to try to embarrass you on the field, but off the field, man, those guys are, human beings, man. They always ask about my family. I'm always asking about their families and, significant others and whatnot. And that's the brotherhood that I think is special for us, is because we went through so much that offseason. Like, you talk about brutal training in college. I mean, Tommy Moffitt had us out there in 98-degree humidity in Louisiana. We're running 110s, pushing sleds,
Nice.
Throwing up on the field in the hot summer days. And, those are the things we remember, is like we went through it together, forever bonded. And then, to finish it off with a national championship, meant so much more than obviously seeing where everybody is now, what we've grown into, what we've blossomed into, in the football field and off the field, guys, different ventures. That's what it's all about. That's really why we play this game, is, the forever friendships and relationships we build.
In terms of your pro career, you've lined up against some pretty tough guys, and especially in the AFC North. Are there guys that you've lined up against that you just hated lining up against, or just the toughest guys that you line up against? And what made them so? What made them so frustrating or fun or whatever?
I think one of the toughest. That's a really good question. I think one of the toughest O-line actually comes from practice. Corey Lindsley, he was a center. He was our center in LA for 2 years, and I went up against him every day for 2 years in practice. And I kid you not, man, that's like, he really helped my game develop. Because I was always a solid player, but when I played in 2021, and then when I really played in 2022, when I became a starter, man, I saw my game and my production elevate. And it was because of like him every day in practice. Like, we were going, like, Corey would look at me before the practice period, and he'd be like, every Wednesday we'd bang our helmets. He'd be like, let's get after it today. And it was 10 plays, right? And he would look at me and be like, let's work. And so, he would tell me, he'd be like, hey, can you give me more power moves today? Like, let me see a more like vertical power rip, like really get up the field on the snap of the ball. And so I do that for him. And then, whenever, he'd help service me, I'd say, hey, Corey, can I get you to be a jump set? Like, really shoot your right hand at me. This, we were playing the Indianapolis Colts, and I said, hey, Ryan Kelly loves to shoot his right hand, like off the ball, like snap, right hand punch, like, and really try to punch me in the helmet, like in the face. And so things like that, man, it's what helped make me the player I am today. And he's the best. Just crafty. Corey was underratedly strong. He was an undersized guy. He was 6'2", 6'1", 280, but, could lift the house, easily 400-pound bencher, 600-pound squatter. I mean, whenever he did dumbbell rows, it was at least 160-pound dumbbell and above. One of the best guys, sincere guy, still friends with him to this day. And That's a good question. I'm glad you asked that.
Is there a player that you're closest to in the NFL? Is there a bond that you've got over any other guys? Like,
Shoot, I think one of my gifts of who I am as a person is, I gravitate towards people. I'm a likable guy. I've always been a great locker room guy, and so, man, I don't know if there's anybody more than the other, but I mean, I've had gained a lot of friends in the NFL that I know for a fact that long and behold, 10 years from now, when we're all done playing, I could call them and they'd still pick up the phone and we rekindle where we left off. And so there really isn't one person that I pinpoint, but definitely a lot of them are really close friends of mine that, I guarantee we'll still keep that relationship moving forward.
You talked a lot about the sort of those little intricacies of the game that sort of make or break players and plays sometimes. That it's. I remember hearing a story, and I'm sure this is pretty common for players, but the white knuckles. That's for offensive linemen, right? And what that means is
heavier. They're heavier, lighter. Yep.
Yeah. How much? I mean, film study is obviously important, but who really showed you how to study film? So you could sort of get those little tips and identify sort of what you need to know, because you're just talking about, the right punch, from Ryan. Who showed you how to study film and really dig in so that you can get those little pieces that make or break plays?
My first defensive line coach in the NFL, Giff Smith. He's the defensive line coach now with the Rams. But he was one of the smartest. Like when you just talked about, like, we went into games as a defensive line just like knowing like they were going to run this. Giff was one of the best. And, just a quick tidbit. Like I remember, right, we're playing, who were we playing? We were playing somebody. I forgot who was the quarterback. And he wasn't a mobile quarterback. He was in the gun, or he was under center, excuse me. And Giff paused it, right? He looks at me. He's got a Southern accent. He went to Georgia Southern. He goes, "Well, Bray, what play do you think they're running here?" And I said, "Well, Coach, if I'm gonna be real with you, they're probably running a run play." And he goes, "No, they are running a run play. Now, where do you think it's going?" And I said, "Man, Coach, they're probably running to the right." And lo and behold, they ran open zone to the right. We're just watching film on this team. And it was the Vikings. It was Kirk Cousins who was the quarterback at the time.
The mobile Kirk Cousins. Yeah.
Mobile Kirk Cousins. And he goes, "Well, I'm gonna give you a tidbit." He's like, "Why do you think they're running to the right?" I said, "Man, Coach, if I'm gonna be real with you, I don't know." And so we're watching film, and he goes, "Watch this." He starts going through the film, and he goes, "Watch Kirk's back foot. He'll have one back foot more open and pride than the other. He won't be balanced. Most quarterbacks come out under center in like a balanced squat position. But Kirk always opened. He always favored one side when he was under center. When it was run to the right, Kirk his body was a little opened. Like he had like a little 45-degree opened up to the right. Like his right foot would just be a little more back. It's the same thing if you see a quarterback in shotgun, right? If he's going to hand off the ball to his running back to the right, the quarterback's right foot usually is back because he's going to hand it and then he's going to check off, like a zone read action. So Kirk always had that little tidbit. And, that was like one of like the, tells. One of those tell-alls that I was like, and it's not true for every quarterback, right? Or if he's open, it's different. Some guys are different. But that was one of the things that was like, this is how guys like the Aaron Donalds of the NFL, the Cam Haywards, the TJ Watts, the Myles Garretts, this is how they know how to pick and choose. This is when I can do this on this play, right? They've seen it in film. They test it out. They go through multiple plays in the cut up. Does it hold true, right? That's all you got to it's calculated risk, right? Does it hold true? Does the pattern hold true? And that was, that was my first tidbit of like, oh, this is how you got to watch film. And I mean, not just the quarterback, but O-line stance, right? Different formations. Are they in gun near, gun far, right? Does this hold true? Do they run power to the field? Is it an open side play? There's so much, man. There's such a rabbit hole I can go into of things I've learned in the NFL and just football terms and football smarts, in general. But Yeah, that's another great question, and another one of those like aha moments as a young NFL player.
There'd be a lot of money if someone were to just analyze tells of players and sell them
Yeah.
off.
And you know what crazy is, the game has become so much more interactive for the fans and for the media now, that there is a big analytical side part of it.
Yeah,
And I won't go into that because a lot of it is private for teams on how they analytically study their
yeah.
opponents. But there is personnel departments and allocated resources and money that go into these analytical parts of NFL teams that study, when this guy's in this stance, what play are they running? When this guy puts this hand down, what are they doing? What does it look like on the, and it's crazy that there is a study for it. And now it's so great that they have like the NFL Plus accounts where you can watch the all 22 film, right? You can hear the TV copies, and these fans are starting to just bridge the gap and understand the game more. And I think that's so awesome now, as people are starting to, see the game more for just what it really is, and they can appreciate that part of the game.
Appreciate the intricacy. It's not just guys lining up and hitting each other. It's so much more complex than that.
Don't get it twisted though. At the end of the day, you still got to buckle up your chin strap and go hit somebody now, right? Like,
Right.
I'm talking about the analytical part of it. But at the end of the day, man, you got to go hit somebody. Running, blocking, and tackling are the three things that will not change and will forever be the same in football.
Absolutely. Brayden, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's put your analyst hat on. I see a lot of your takes on the quarterbacks this past weekend in college football. Anybody impressed you more than it was kind of not a great weekend for top college quarterback prospects? Who impressed you? Who maybe disappointed you a little bit in this weekend's games?
I got three quarterbacks. Obviously, one I'm high on is and I've talked about him for a while now, is Carson Beck.
That's interesting because not a lot of people are.
Yeah, and I'll say this. Carson Beck gets a bad rap as a quarterback, in my opinion, because of how he looks and how he carries himself. The kid, if you're looking at him, if you didn't know that he played football and was a quarterback, you'd think he does not care about the game. He has kind of like that droopy face, like, I don't know why I'm here. He had that quote, I think, when they were playing Texas when he was at Georgia, where he says, I really don't watch football when I'm at home. And so I get a little hazy when people say Carson Beck's not a good football player. And I say, what makes you say that? And people always say, well, this is not the look of a quarterback one. I mean, I actually quote tweeted it before I came on here, and I said, people judge the kid solely based off of how he looks, right? And if you look at his resume as a starter at Georgia, one of the premier teams in college football, who sees top tier competition week in and week out in the SEC, the kid went 24-3, threw for 8,000 yards and 58 touchdowns, right? And that's against top tier. That's against the Alabamas of the world, the LSUs, the Floridas, week in and week out. But I'm on that Carson Beck train. I think he's the most polished quarterback in this year's draft. I think he's a safe pick. I think he is the best. Quarterback 2 for me that stood out this week was Garrett Nussmeier. I think he's the son of an NFL coach, let alone an NFL quarterback coach. So
no, it's not fair.
it's not fair because the kid mentally is going to be ahead of the curve, and I think that's what puts Nuss ahead of these other quarterbacks like the Sellers or your Drew Alars or your or Levitt out at Arizona State. Is Nuss plays in a conference just like Carson Beck did in the SEC, and Nuss has seen top tier competition week in, week out. And I think he's going to be mentally prepared week in and week out just because of who his father is and his relationship to the game. And the third quarterback really that impressed me this weekend was the young kid out of Cal, Hawaii boy, Jaren Kiave Sangapolisele. I think he's a really young, talented kid. He's still young. I'm hoping Cal keeps him throughout his career there. I mean, because, there is going to be some big Power 4 teams that throw NIL bags at him after this year, without a doubt. And so those three quarterbacks, man, I'm really high on. And the first two, I feel like with Beck and Nussmeier, I feel like, in my opinion, are the two safe picks for round 1 quarterbacks for teams looking for quarterbacks next year. And then, everybody else, man, when I look at it, the Sellers, the Drew Allers, the Levitts of Arizona State. I mean, I can go into a list of all the quarterbacks that are there, man. I'm not really sold yet on these guys are surefire day ones, hand the keys to the franchise to them picks yet. Nothing really pops out for me, and so it's still a long season, man, and just
Yeah.
for a guy like Arch Manning as well. I didn't mean to bash the kid in any form or way when I said what I wanted to say about him, but I think we jumped the gun, and I think the media jumped the gun, especially way too early, solely on the kid's last name. Man, I just wanted people to understand that we needed a body of work for the kid before we were able to just call him the first pick, let alone the Heisman favorite this year. And that's kind of my quarterback take going into this year. I mean, I know I'm a nose tackle. People
No.
probably like, man, you play double teams for a living, but I've been very fortunate to be around some good quarterbacks, pick their brains, learn the game, see how they see it, what makes them successful, how to evaluate the game from a quarterback's perspective, and just try to put it into my own tidbits of whenever I see fit.
I just want to say, you and I, I'm sorry,
No, go
you and I
ahead.
were the only ones on Jackson Dart
Yeah.
this
yeah.
offseason, man.
I love
it was a
Dart.
lonely place,
It was.
trying to back Jackson Dart. There was a lot of people that killing me on that take.
It was. I wouldn't have been mad if the Steelers took Dart at what, 21? Did they have picked 21 this year? 21. I wouldn't have been mad if the Steelers took Dart or Harmon. But I'm excited for him. He had a really good preseason. Like I said, I'm not going to buy too much stock. Preseason games are preseason games for a reason. But just the intangibles of his arm, his pocket presence, how he was able to manage through his progressions at Ole Miss. I mean, it reminded me a lot of Justin Herbert. It reminded me a little bit of Josh Allen, just what I saw in those characteristics. And then I think being around Brian Dabble, who is a really good offensive coach, a really good talent evaluator, dating back to his days at Alabama. I think being around that was kind of telling that, hey, they wanted Dart, they got their guy, and obviously they were excited when they drafted him. So I'm excited to see where his career ends up, man. I'm hoping this is one of those, like, I told you so's in 5 years, and this helps me get into a GM spot somewhere in the NFL. But it's all fun and games at the end of the day, and everybody, has their own takes on it, which is really cool.
We'll see if you guys get on the frozen cold takes, whatever.
Yeah, hopefully not.
That's one thing I'm definitely trying to avoid.
Being in camp, I know you got to go soon, but being in camp, and it's a tough question because you're these are all your colleagues there. But were there guys that surprised you that you're really excited about that people might not be thinking about as much on the Steelers team?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I don't think this guy's a surprise because he's been there, but Darnell Washington, I know everybody knows about Darnell, but Darnell Washington in the pass game, like, nail me to the cross, man. I think he's a guy you need in the pass game. I know people see him as like the offensive tackle, the blocker, the bona fide, like, we're running to Darnell. This is like, he's our guy. But man, I love Darnell Washington in the pass game, man. I think he's such a cheat code. I mean, in the red zone, in the goal line, I think you come out in 5 wide. I think you put 4 on one side, isolate him on the other side, and just throw him up the rock. Like high school football, 1-on-1, like dunk on somebody. You saw against Jacksonville, man. He went up the seam, went up and got it against a 2-head shell. Like, I love Darnell Washington in the pass game this year. I want to buy so much stock in it because I see him in practice. I see him in practice, man. He dunks on guys in 1-on-1s and 7-on, man. Like, people know him as like the Mercedes Lewis, like the bona fide blocking tight end. But him, I'm really excited for Scotty Miller. Scotty's he'll eat with Aaron at quarterback this year. Scotty's a good route runner, man.
Scotty Miller. I think he's. I'm gonna talk about frozen cold takes here. I think he's the second best receiver on this team.
Man, he's so efficient. I mean, he played with Tom Brady. There's a reason Tom Brady loves Scotty Miller and always talks about Scotty whenever he's covering. Like, he was covering Pittsburgh last year, and he talked about Scotty there. And that Super Bowl run they made in Tampa Bay, man, like, he can play ball in this league, and he's been around, this long for a reason. And so those two especially, I mean, they're not under the radar guys, but me personally, man, I'm excited to watch those guys and watch the next step they take, particularly with, Aaron at quarterback.
All right, last question from me, Braden. I like to ask athletes about this. Who's your the biggest character you've ever played with, either NFL or college? Who's the biggest, you know, I won't say crazy, but, you know,
Mm.
locker room character, on the field character?
Oh wow, that's a good question, man. There, when I was with the Chargers, Derwin James was one. Derwin talked a lot of smack. We'd be losing. I mean, we were losing like 30-6 against the Ravens in 2021, and Derwin's talking smack to Lamar like as if we're winning 21-zip. Derwin's a character in the locker room. Character, always trying to play Madden, always trying to play pink, always trying to do something, be a part of it. With the Steelers, man, it's a good question. Cam is always around. That's just Cam being an old man. Like he's always trying to insert himself in things. That's the old man side of him. Everybody jokes around with him about it. He's definitely a character.
The dad
Broderick Jones is a character. Broderick's hilarious. Broderick is 6'6", 340 pounds, and thinks he's a wide receiver sometimes. So sometimes in practice you'll see him out there on a Friday, like the fast Friday practices, running goal line routes with the receivers. But man, yeah, everybody has a good personality in the NFL, right? Teams do a good job nowadays of getting guys that see fit for their locker room. So you go into an NFL locker room nowadays, there's not a lot of guys who are not supposed to be there, I should say.
Thank you so much, Braden.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Braden. This was great. We really appreciate you coming on and appreciate your time. Check out Braden on X. His X account is fantastic. I follow you. You do some great stuff, man.
Appreciate you guys.
Appreciate it a lot.
Maybe
Ron, thanks a lot. Good luck. Well, we want to see you back in Pittsburgh.
Thank you.
Man.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Thanks, Braden.
Take care. And thanks everybody for listening to the Seal Sanctuary podcast. We'll talk to you next time.
Nothing over till it's over.
What's that from, the 80s?
It's probably in the 70s.
This is disappointing as hell.
Now what the fuck are we supposed to do?
Yo, come back now, you hear?
Probably worth the Google.
Saw that coming.